In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to powder paint your jigs. We got three brand new colors from Protec. We got Sprayed Grass, PB&J, and Tilapia. All three of these colors are really cool. But with some of these new colors from Protec, I've had some trouble painting in the past, and I figured out what those issues are. So we're going to talk about those mistakes that we can make when painting our jigs using powder paints, and I'm going to show you exactly how to not have these same problems that I've had in the past. And for anybody new, I am Matt Luna, and welcome to the channel. If you see this shirt that I got on YouTube, it's just allowed me to start selling some of my merchandise here on YouTube. So if you like the shirt, you want to get one, check below this video and grab yourself a shirt. I really appreciate that support. So one of the first mistakes that I know a lot of people make when powder coating their jigs is they put too much powder paint onto the jig. The major issue that you run into when you put too much paint onto your jig is that when you go to bake these and cure that powder paint, if you have too much paint on that head and you're hanging that jig upside down, that paint tries to run down and you end up having this big bulge on the bottom of your jig, and it really messes up the jig and you really can't use it because you just have a whole bunch of paint just hanging off the end of your jig. So what you want to do is you don't want to overheat the jig, and you want to dip it into the powder paint, swish it around really fast, and then bang off the excess on the side of the cup. You want to get the extra paint off of the jig. So another mistake that I want to talk to you guys about is not shaking up your powder paint. If you're painting your jigs directly out of the cups, you need to be shaking that powder to loosen it up inside of that cup. If you don't loosen it up, it doesn't allow that jig to go into the paint smoothly. You're going to end up getting buildup. You're going to end up having too much paint, which we already covered in the issues that you're going to have with that. So you want to make sure that you are shaking the powder paint regularly, especially if you're doing it directly out of the cup. Another recommendation is to use a fluid bed. A fluid bed basically puts air into the paint. You take the paint out of the cup and you put it into another device and it pumps air into it. It kind of fluffs everything up, and you don't have to have any of that shaking because it's constantly doing it for you. And those are available on the Do It Molds website. I'm going to put a product list down in the description of today's video. So a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talked about, there's going to be a product description down there with a link to the Do It Mold site. If you guys end up going to the Do It Mold site, please use that link so they know that I sent you. The next mistake I want to talk to you guys about is heating the jig too long and getting it too hot. One, this allows you to get too much paint on there and it'll build up inside the eye of the hook. And it also, especially with these newer powder paints that have the flakes in it, they got some clear coat in there, it'll end up covering up, and I think it burns away that flake. So you want to heat it just enough to get that powder paint to attach to the head of that jig. If you overheat the jig, it's going to end up not having all those flakes come through. I found out the hard way. I was trying to paint my jigs the same as everything else that I've been doing in the past, and I kept having problems seeing all the flakes come through on the heads of my jigs. And what I figured out is I was heating it too long. With these flakes and the clear coats and everything, I needed to heat my jigs a little bit less amount of time, and then I had that vibrant flake come through. So the next mistake that we're going to talk about is not heating our jigs long enough. You need to heat your jigs for the right amount of time, because if you don't heat it long enough, that powder paint isn't going to melt onto the head of your jig and it's just going to fall off. So you need to heat it up long enough in order for that paint to melt down and adhere to the head of that jig, but not too long to where you're gonna basically cover up those flakes, add too much powder paint to the head of the jig. So there is a happy medium there. You're gonna have some trial and error. You're gonna have to kind of figure out, depending on what size head you're using. The smaller heads take less time to heat, the larger heads take more time to heat. The next mistake I want to talk to you guys about is not putting enough paint onto the head of your jig. What I found with some of these newer Protec powder paints is they have the base color, which is brown, green, doesn't really matter, but they have the base color. Then they have the flakes. They're going to supplement that base color. And then there's also a clear coat that goes into those powder paints. Basically, all of that comes together to enable you to have the base color, that green or brown, and the flakes and that clear coat kind of brings everything together. Now, since we have less of that base green or black or blue color in our powder paint, you have a chance that you're going to end up not putting enough paint onto the head of the jig, and then you're going to end up having some of that lead come through. So you want to put enough paint on there to get nice, clean, clear coverage over the entire jig, but you don't want to put too much paint on there and then have paint dripping off of your jig in the baking process. And just like getting the jig head to the right temperature, there's going to be some trial and error in there, but you're just going to have to kind of figure it out based on how big of a jig you're using, how much heat that's going to take, and how much paint you need to get on that jig. I can't explain it to you exactly in a video like this. It's going to take some trial and error on your part. This next mistake that I want to talk to you guys about is not baking your jigs. If you guys paint your own jigs and you're not baking them after they're painted, you are missing out on immense amounts of durability. If you're just painting them and then take them to the lake, you're probably complaining that the paint chips off too easily. If you're not baking your jigs after you coat them with that powder paint, you're making it so they chip easy. You're not getting the durability that these paints are designed for. What you need to be doing is baking these jigs in a toaster oven or in some sort of oven to get that paint to really cure. It really helps it harden. What I like to do is I put them in my toaster oven for 20 minutes at about 350. With some of these newer powder paints, you can tone down that temperature just a little bit so that way you don't have any issues with that flake going away in the baking process. I have had it where it looked good on the jig and then I heated it too hot in the baking process and I lost some of that flake. What I like to do is 350 degrees for around 20 minutes, and I do that 2 separate times. I feel like doing it those 2 separate times really helps get that paint nice and hard, nice and durable. With these newer powder paints, you might want to try 325, 315 for your temperatures. That way it doesn't get rid of some of that flake. I've heated them in the toaster oven for too long or too hot, and I ended up losing some of that flake, and I found that it was just too hot in that toaster oven. If you guys take the tips that I outlined in today's video, it's going to help you immensely with your powder painting, especially with these newer Protec powder paints that are out on the market that they actually look amazing on your jigs. It just takes a little bit of getting to know those paints. They don't function exactly the same as some of our traditional greens and our blacks, but take these tips. It's going to help you immensely. If you want to learn more about making jigs, click on the video that's on the screen right now, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.